Greetings and good tidings, you good people. Welcome to Stone by Stone, an Edgewater Castle podcast, where we peel back the layers of the beautiful game like the 32-paneled onion that it is. Join me, Andrew Swanson, your host, as we engage in some insightful conversations with some very remarkable individuals. These brave souls will share their unique perspectives on the world and its game, their personal narratives, and how football has woven itself into the fabric of their lives like the thread in a highly personalized quilt. A heartfelt thank you to our production sponsors, Tightrope Recording, for their masterful sound engineering, and to our dedicated listeners. Your continued support means the absolute world to us, so thank you for it. Now, hear ye, gather round the hearth, pour something literally or figuratively warm into your cups, and welcome to Stone by Stone.
Hello guys, welcome back to the Stone by Stone podcast. I'm your new host for this week, Gareth Mullins. I am the Director of Communications here at Edgewater Castle FC. Been here for the last 3 years now, and have absolutely loved this experience I've had here. And I'm sitting across from one of the other Directors of Communications here in the city. So, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, yeah, no. First and foremost, thanks for having me. Jhamie Chin. I am similar to Garrett. I'm the head of communications for Chicago Fire FC on the sporting side of the business. So I oversee our the sporting communications, everything involving first team, second team, and academy. That's communications related. And this is going to be season 7 for me now with the club. I've been with the club for 6.5 years.
Excellent.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you come and share your experiences and get the ball rolling, I guess, right? So, kind of before we get into your professional career and everything, let's kind of go back in time, right? Talk about like your past, the childhood, and kind of where you came from and how that really influenced what you're doing today, right? So why not paint a picture of your life as a kid, right? Like, where did you grow up and what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, no, totally. So it's actually a really good question because my connection with the sport starts obviously from way back then, and I've been able to make a career out of it since then. But I'm Jamaican. Originally, I'm Jamaican Chinese. So I'm half Jamaican, half Chinese. Was born in Jamaica and then moved to the U.S. when I was 8 years old. So being born in Jamaica, that's, I think, my first introduction to the sport. Outside of track and field, I would say soccer is right there, right? Those are the two biggest sports in Jamaica. That's why we're always so fast when we play soccer as well. And so I was really born into it. Big soccer-loving family. Did not really have a chance, or choice, I should say, on whether or not I was going to play soccer or like it or not. It was just surrounding me when I was growing up. And so thankfully I did like it. And as a kid, to your point in terms of what I was doing, spent a lot of time playing soccer as a kid. 3 brothers, 3 sisters. All my brothers played soccer. So a lot of times growing up, we'd be playing in the house. We had like a mini goal in the house. We were playing indoor soccer, which my stepmom didn't always love because we were knocking over her stuff. But, you know, my dad was a big advocate of that, and she loved it too, just to see all us boys playing together. So a lot of that. And then, you know, education was something that was very big in my family as well. Growing up, you know, obviously that's big in Chinese culture. And so, I mean, honestly, it was sports was a big focus in our household, with soccer certainly being number one.
Absolutely. What position did you play growing up, might I ask?
So I was a midfielder. I like to think I was, you know, more of a number 10, which I think I was more in the youth days. But as I moved up to more competitive levels, I played more as like an 8 or even an outside mid from time to time.
That's awesome, man. I mean, I absolutely relate to your story. I'm originally from the UK. I moved here when I was 3.5 to the States. And going from that background, you know, in footy, in UK, it's massive. Everyone follows it. My father, massive Liverpool guy, so he always got me on the train with that back in the day. I'm a huge Celtic guy myself, but, you know, always a huge part of my life as well. And it's so funny, like, seeing the culture translate into an American atmosphere growing up from, you know, an immigrant background. Right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, when we first moved to the U.S., it was still, and obviously it's still growing, but it was such a fringe sport at that time. Definitely not as big part of the mainstream culture like it is now, to your point. So I remember there weren't really tons of kids that were playing soccer at least competitively when we moved to the U.S. There was always good exercise at the youth levels, and then people would kind of phase out of it as they got to middle school and older.
Yeah.
But people really playing it competitively in the academies and just how professional the whole system is now in the U.S., that didn't exist. And certainly there weren't a lot of, I would say, black people also. I only want to say people of color because you have a lot of Latinos that were playing. But there weren't a lot of African Americans or black people in the U.S. when we were first here playing. And so it was very different for us from that side, my family, because we're coming from a country where it was so embedded in the culture. But it's been nice to see just how much the sport has grown in the U.S. and how much more diverse it's become as well.
So what would you say through your experiences growing up and seeing it firsthand in the industry, kind of going into it later on, right? But what do you say is that core reason why soccer is expanding in the rate it has been in America now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think there's definitely a lot of reasons for it. Obviously, like the demographics of the U.S. has changed, but I also give a lot of credit to MLS and just the professional soccer ecosystem that's developed with USL and all these other leagues. Like I said, when I was growing up in Orlando, there wasn't a professional team anywhere near. I think the closest team would have been DC United.
Yeah.
And so the idea of pursuing a professional career in soccer felt very far away and not something that was very tangible. It felt like you had to be in Europe, right, to really have a chance at it. And I think now, compared to when, my younger brothers are 14 and 11 years younger than me, compared to when they were growing up, Orlando City was a thing in Orlando. The academy was there, right? There was more of a pathway, I think, to see yourself growing with the sport and playing professionally. I think from that side, that's a big thing. There's also another, I think the video game FIFA has helped a ton,
absolutely.
Right? And I just think like the younger generations is more diverse, and they seem to more connect with soccer because of the length of play. I mean, there's so many reasons, but they just seem to be, gravitating more towards soccer as opposed to some of the traditional big four sports in the U.S. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So going back to your personal experiences then, what would you say is your favorite memory playing soccer in the U.S. growing up?
Oh, that's a great question. My favorite memory. Man, there's quite a few that I have like from high school and college, but I think like what I always enjoyed the most was playing pickup with my family. That was something we did every weekend for as long as I could remember when I was growing up. And it was not just my immediate family, but cousins, uncles, and then we started roping in other people from the neighborhood. And it was just like the pure love for the sport, Our parents played. I think it's good to be competitive and to be serious if you want to be a top level player, but you also have to enjoy playing as well. And like some of those memories as a family that we have together, I think are some of my favorite for sure.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I mean, it's half the reason why I'm here at Edgewater right now doing the work I do.
Yeah.
I really fell in love as an intern when I first started up way back in the day in undergrad, just how much the community mission of Edgewater Castle is, like community access and being able to provide those experiences to people. Absolutely. Especially many of our players are also first-gen immigrants coming to Chicago, trying to establish themselves in the city, make friends, get connections, and seeing that through football is just it's mind-blowing. It's lovely.
I agree. It's one of the most beautiful parts about the sport, I feel.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, it's awesome that you bring up your family too, because your brother is also in the industry, right? So want to maybe talk about his work, what he does?
Yeah. I'm happy to. I mean, he played professionally for 10 years. We actually worked together when he first began his professional career in Orlando. That's when I was starting out as well. So we got to start out our professional careers together, which was pretty cool. Awesome. I was in the front office side of things. He was obviously on the field. But yeah, now he's now in the working world, right? The real working world. As a player, you work half days. I always tease him, but he's an agent, so he represents soccer players, both men and women, all over the world. And I believe he's in like year 3 or year 4 of running his agency.
That's awesome.
And it seems to be going pretty well so far. I mean, they were just acquired by, Young Money, Lil Wayne's company, who are already representing players in the NFL and NBA and different American sports. So it's a big just sign in the progress he's been able to make very quickly to have someone at that level believe in his business and invest in it. And so I think he's now going to take it even further, more steps forward and really grow the business and make even more of an impact. But just more broadly, it's really amazing what he's doing with his agency. I think he's wanted to take a different approach, which is, providing opportunities to younger players, looking in markets where maybe the big agencies aren't looking, and really providing a personalized service and approach to his clients that I think sometimes gets overlooked or is just not really something that's offered with a lot of the bigger agencies.
For sure.
Yeah.
Would you say your relationship with him has stayed the same or changed due to like the different pathways you're taking within the sport? Right?
Yeah, I mean, our personal relationship has not changed. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
We've been close because we're 3 years apart. He's older than me, but we're 3 years apart, and we've been close from day one, and that's always been the case. The part that has changed, obviously, is our professional relationship, because, as I mentioned, I started out working in the front office for a team that he played for, which was interesting because when you're on the front office side, you're privy to things that's happening on the team side, and maybe he's in trade talks or whatever, right? And you have to manage that dynamic as a brother. So that was very interesting. But now, obviously, we don't have that dynamic. The one connection that we do have is he does have a player on the Fire's roster.
There you
his
go.
Client. Someone he had signed as a client before he was with the Fire, so there was no collusion there. And so, we still have that connection, but obviously there is a bit of separation of church and state there, because we just have to be mindful of that. But certainly, I have a special relationship with his client because he's my brother's his agent,
Yeah.
So it's nice from that side that we're still connected, but not quite the same day to day as it was before.
Yeah, that's a very interesting dynamic you're talking about with trying to maintain professionalism, I guess, right? With balancing that. What would you say is the most difficult part or the difficult moment of that? Trying to establish whether or not, I can talk about this working for the club and all that, or...
Yeah, I mean, it was tricky to navigate, I would say.
Sure.
I think one of the hardest parts was trying to get my coworkers and my bosses at that time to understand that they could trust me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we could have these discussions in those meetings, in those rooms. And, thankfully I was also just starting out in my career. So I wasn't in, those super high level meetings quite regularly. But in the event that there were sensitive meetings or topics being discussed related to the team or my brother, it was very important to me that they understood that they could trust me.
Yeah.
And I think it helps when your family member understands that and respects that as well, that there has to be some boundaries there, and I can't share certain things, and that's just how it has to be. And so having his support was very, very helpful, and that allowed me then to earn the trust of my coworkers, who then came to realize okay, we got past that early awkwardness when those topics would come up, and then we could speak freely as coworkers, and they understood it would stay right there.
Has your ball knowledge changed through each position? Looking at the sport from a player perspective versus an industry perspective.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I would say that it has. I think at the beginning, obviously had the knowledge of the sport and the player's perspective, to your point, but I really had to learn about the business, and what it's like to be, what the business of soccer is like, and how I can grow in that business and make an impact, etc. So I think for a lot of people that are in my position, that come in from the corporate world or maybe an agency, they have the reverse learning curve, where they have to learn the sport, right, and the nuances and the culture of the sport. Not so much the corporate side of things. For me, it was a little bit the opposite. I had the ball knowledge, to your point, but I had to get the business knowledge nailed down. And so with each club that I've worked at and with each year that goes by, I think I've been able to get a much better understanding of that and add that to my tool belt, if you will.
Yeah, I relate to that completely myself. I mean, coming in, when I first started working for Edgewater Castle, I was just a fan, right, of soccer. I've never played ball in my life. I've always loved watching it on the TV. Obviously, I was a rugby guy growing up, but absolutely love the sport. But as soon as I started working with the organization, staying here year after year now, I feel like that experience you get from behind the mirror and everything really starts to grow in you as a person and develops you into that person that can not only really understand and enjoy watching, but also know like what's going on behind the scenes, with it too.
Totally. And I would say you've probably experienced this too, but you look at like it in some ways can kind of kill your fandom a little bit once you've seen behind the curtain, because you now, like when I see like transfer rumors with Arsenal or even certain things with the Lakers, I'm a big Laker fan. Like I don't know, I just view it much differently than when I did. You realize this deal might not happen because this has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen. Whereas as a fan, you might just have that optimism right away. And you kind of had that you're like blind to it all, right? And sometimes ignorance is bliss. So I totally understand your point. It definitely changes how you view not only soccer, but other sports that you're a fan of as well.
How do you try and maintain your fandom then while being in a consistent environment where your day-to-day is like dealing with the business aspect?
Yeah, I think you have to be intentional about it. Because it's a job, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's like if you work at a restaurant, you don't necessarily want to go and eat at that restaurant when it's your time off, right? But I mean, it helps that I just really love sports and I love soccer as well. So I still very much enjoy watching the games. I think just how I interact with the sport of my teams is slightly different because my mindset has shifted slightly, but I do still love watching soccer and watching sports, and so it's just really about making time for it. Like I still go to the pubs. Usually I try to go every week with my buddies to watch Arsenal play, and like that's when I can like really be a fan and like yell at the TV about the decisions the coach is making, right? Like that's when I get to like turn that fan switch on. So I think you just really have to be intentional, and if you're already passionate about it and really enjoy it, it shouldn't be too much work to do that.
Absolutely. What's your favorite pub to go to?
AJ Hudson's.
Yeah,
AJ Hudson's. Yeah,
a classic.
I do love the Globe because I'm an Arsenal fan. But it's tough to get in there sometimes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so AJ's and the Albion are two. I actually just went to the Albion for the first time and really, really liked it last week. So those are my two go-to spots.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah.
I'm a huge Embassy guy in Little Italy.
Okay.
Lovely
good spot as
lovely
well.
Spot,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
The Chicago pub scene.
Very good.
Really good.
Very, very good. I agree.
Not talked about at all,
yes,
I will say.
I agree. Fido's is another good one, too.
Absolutely.
Different vibes in each of the ones you go to as well. Yeah.
The inner mechanisms of the Chicago pub scene.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
And I will say it's a great way to introduce someone to the sport. Like my wife, for example, she first started getting into it through the All or Nothing Arsenal documentary.
Yeah.
And like really felt connected. And I said, okay, come to the pubs with me. So we started bringing her, and just like the vibe in the pub, the culture, that's so unique to soccer in a lot of ways. I know there's sports bars, but just the vibe in the pub is very different, and it helps that she loved the food at AJ's. Shout out AJ Hudson's breakfast menu. And she really started to become a soccer fan from that, So I always tell people that I know, coworkers and stuff, if you want to get your spouse into it, or if you know someone that you want to get them into sport, bring them to the pub with you, man. At the very least, they'll have a few beers and have a good time that way.
Exactly. So. It goes back to your community aspect of the sport, right?
Yeah.
You're not just watching a game on a couch, though I do love watching the odd Premier League game, just lazing around. I love my 6:30 a.m. kickoffs, just lazing around. But yeah, like being a part of a community, and for me being in post-grad now, I'm currently doing my master's degree.
Okay.
I only just graduated undergrad like a couple months ago, which is crazy to say.
Wow.
But
congrats, by the way.
Thank you, man. Thank you. But yeah, that sense of community that soccer and football and whatever you want to call it brings, it means so much to people, I think. And
absolutely.
To see that mimicked in the city now through pub culture, through local teams like ours, it's great to replicate because, again, coming from the UK originally, it's a lovely part of what I think really makes local communities stand out. And seeing like Americans trying to get into it more through that as well, it's lovely.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I agree.
So enough about pubs.
Let's have a whole episode just about pubs.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about your career then. Right?
Sure.
So you were a former player.
Yep.
Now you got into sports communications. How was that transition like? Like what motivated you to get behind the scenes.
Yeah, so I have a great origin story as it relates to this.
Yeah.
I always like sharing this story because there is a professor at Wingate University where I did undergrad that deserves a lot of credit because I actually wasn't setting out when I went to university to even work in PR. I was actually going to be a biology major to go to pharmacy school. And, I come from an immigrant family and, your education and certain fields of education are definitely prioritized. And so for me, I wasn't thinking so much about my passion at that time. I was thinking more about what could, make me a good living, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when I was starting undergrad, this was kind of when the news industry was shifting. Internet was rising, social media was rising. And so journalism was changing in a lot of ways. And I'd been on the newspaper staff in high school. I wrote short stories a bunch as a kid. I really deep down wanted to be a journalist. But when I got to college, I kind of reoriented and said, okay, no, I'm going to be 18-year-old me said, okay, pharmacists make a lot of money. We have a good pharmacy program here at this school. I'm going to do that. And so became a bio major. About a year and a half into it, a chemistry professor by the name of Dr. Dom at Wingate, shout out Dr. Dom, pulled me aside and said, hey, are you sure this is the path for you? You're doing fine in the classes, but I don't really get the sense that you enjoy this, day to day. And so he said, go home over winter break. Think about what it is that you really, really want to do, And, I'll help you get into any programs, change the major, whatever you need to do. And so I went home that winter, and that's when I was thinking about, hey, what do I really like to do? I kept coming back to writing, obviously kept coming back to sports. And so that led me down this path. I then pursued a major in communications. Fortunately, right around that time, Orlando City was moving from Austin, Texas to Orlando. So in my hometown, professional soccer team was starting up. And I was able to then, get an internship with them, really get a better understanding of, okay, what would that be like? What are some positions I could maybe fit into? And since then, I've just kind of continued riding the wave since then.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, your Dr. Dom was a Professor Minkoff for me,
Okay.
so I totally get it. I was a political science communication studies double major, and going into it myself, I was just, again, thinking about the money, right? For me, it was all just going, again, from the immigrant background. My father always talking to me, saying, pursue something that will lead you to success. Right?
Yes.
But that success, I found out, can be a lot of different things, right? And can be something that truly can be reflective of you, right, as a person.
Absolutely.
And I feel like the sports industry, for people like us, right, it's absolutely great things that can be provided through that. Right?
I completely agree, and I just want to, make the point to mention, not that I think you think this is what I'm insinuating, but no slight to the parents whatsoever.
Oh, absolutely.
To your point, right?
Absolutely.
I
love my dad.
Yeah. Just want to call that out because they're definitely going to watch this.
Absolutely.
So no slight.
Oh, absolutely.
That was coming from a place of what they thought was best for us and love, right?
Absolutely.
I think the best case scenario is if you're able to combine both, right? If you're able to make a good living, everyone says that, right?
Yeah.
Doing the thing that you love. It's still a job at the end of the day, but I think you'll put more into it because you're so passionate about it, and in the end, you will get more out of it as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what do you exactly do right now in your current position with the Fire?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I oversee the sporting communications team. So right now, that's a team of 3 of us. We do have one person that sits on the brand communications side. So they manage all of the media inquiries and PR strategy around the business side of the business. So sponsorships, community relations, all the off the field stuff. We handle the PR for everything that is related to the on-field aspects of the business. Yep. So that's first team, that's second team, that's the academy. Here in Chicago, because it is such a big sports market and it's just a big market in general, very competitive. So we have to be much more proactive than maybe some of the more smaller market teams in MLS to build relationships with media members and to try to drive media coverage at the club. Yeah. So a big part of my job is setting the strategy for, okay, what stories are we telling and when are we telling it and where are we telling it? So is it on our own channels? Is it with an external media member, whether that's local TV, that's newspaper? Now you have social media outlets, right? Like there's non-traditional media members coming into the space now. So that's a big focus of mine, is really working with the sporting director to sort of set the narrative and strategy from a communication standpoint. And then from there, that really drives all of our actions as a department in terms of, storytelling, whether externally or internally on our own channels as well. Yeah. To tell the Fire's communication story?
Exactly, through your work and all.
Oh man, I mean, there's so many moving parts to it. There's so many moving parts to it. I would say you really have to the point that I just mentioned, you really have to have that internal alignment on what's the narrative and what are the key messages for the season, right? Absolutely. And so a big part of that right now, I'll give you an example, is we have a new sporting director and head coach, same person in one, right? New leadership staff, a lot of turnover happening at the club. So there's a totally new mission, vision, values, right? Like there's a lot of things that are changing in terms of how we're going to operate. So how do we then communicate that to the public so that they know who we are, what we represent, and why they should support us? Right? At the end of the day, like, they should have to do very little guessing as it relates to that. And so I think it's our job to identify that internally and then come up with strategies to communicate that, right? For sure. And there's so many things, like just one quick example. One of the missions now is to create a world-class club that unites Chicago and wins championships. So when you think about where PR really falls into that, we have an extremely diverse roster with players from all over the world, and we also have a lot of homegrown players, right? So in a market that is very diverse, is very international, but is also very proudly Chicago, how can we tell those individual player stories to get connected with people either primarily in Chicago? Those are the people we want coming to our games. So if Brian Gutierrez from his neighborhood, can we do something with a paper in his neighborhood that tells his story? Someone who grows up there, they see that story. Oh, wow, a kid that went to my high school is playing for the Fire, right? Or maybe there's something specific about his story that's not even soccer related that someone connects with, and that makes them want to support the club, right? So I think we're looking at it from that side. That's how we promote the team. The other side of it is, how do we protect the team? I really see that as our role in PR. We're here to promote and to protect the team. And so we do that through, obviously, preparing individuals properly for interviews, so they're on message. Any crises that come up as well, managing that, media training, etc. There's so many moving parts to it, but I would say at a high level, that's really how we're able to make an impact on the sporting side of the club.
Awesome stuff, Jhamie. Thank you so much for that. And right now, we'll just take a quick little break before we get back into more. Hey guys, welcome back. And we're here with Jhamie Chin. Lovely times. And let's get back into it, right? So before we left on that break, we were talking more of your career. Let's talk a little bit more just generally about sports comm, right? And kind of your favorite parts of it. So what was your favorite part of the content creation process that you engage with?
Oof, good question. So I'm not so involved on the content creation side of things, to be quite honest with you. I mean, that's the thing with MLS nowadays, is everything is so specialized. So we have an amazing content team that funnels up into someone that oversees the content strategy for the club. But obviously we work very, very closely together. Yeah, for sure. And I think my answer for this one would be, and then this goes back to the beginning of my career when I was more involved with that stuff, is it might sound cheesy, but it's true. As a sports fan, like, I like when we create stuff that, like, I try to put myself in a fan's shoe and someone that would support the team, and like, what types of content would I want to see, and like, what really gets the fans hyped. Like, there's no better feeling than when you put something out and the fans are just so happy with it and they want more of it. And so I think, because we want to keep building that culture and that community, right? Yeah, absolutely. To what we talked about earlier. And so I think that's being less on the creation side of it now. We're more involved in, as I said before, like the storytelling ideation. So like we pitch media members, we'll pitch our content team, hey, this is a great story on X player, because we spend the most time with the players out of anyone on the Marcom team. So we'll find out gems, and we're actively looking for stories too. So pitching them on that and have that turn into a really, really great content piece that is well received by our fans, I think is always very validating.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What would you say is your favorite project you've ever worked on then for the club? Like if you had to give like a specific example and all that.
Yeah. No. Favorite project. I would say my favorite. I'm gonna answer this in two parts if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm gonna answer favorite and then one I'm most proud of. So favorite was when I got the call from our sporting director. This was now 3 years ago. That we were going to sign Shaqiri, and I needed to be in Switzerland in 24 hours, more or less. And I was only going to be in Switzerland for 24 hours. And so me and one of our former videographers, who's now with the Atlanta Hawks, we were sent as the club representatives to Switzerland to meet Shaqiri. And I'll back this up. By saying this is something that actually I had pushed for with our sporting director at the time.
Yeah.
I said, hey, if we ever sign a big player, we need to go overseas to be able to capture content on the ground. And I know it's going to cost some coins, but it's going to lead to really, really great content.
Yeah.
And the photos, the assets, everything we're going to get from it is going to be worth it and then some. So I planted those seeds. Thankfully, I had a boss who was very sportive at that time, our former sporting director, who was on board with it and allowed us to do that. So we went over there. He was also Swiss, so he set us up with a couple spaces and people to where we could just hit the ground running. But between myself and our former videographer, really spent that flight like mapping everything out that we wanted to capture with Shaqiri. Also knowing that besides our sporting director, we were going to be the first people from the club that he interacted with. Yeah. This is a guy that's played at the biggest clubs in the world, so we wanted to make a good impression. While also, we were kind of like incognito, like we didn't wear fire gear because it had been out in a little bit, so we didn't want to get spotted in Europe, like with someone, right?
Yeah.
So it was like...
Giving a low key.
Yeah, it was like a movie that should have been called like 24 Hours in Basel or something like that. But it was really, really cool to be able to go over there and like have that experience. I thought the videographer, a guy named Alex Mueller, he did an excellent job coming up with the concept. If you guys go back and watch that signing video, it's unbelievable. The engagement that we got from that, the media coverage that we got was excellent. Some of the most engagement and media coverage we've gotten in my time at the club. So that was my favorite part because that was a really cool like experience that doesn't come along very often. I think what I'm proud of is like the relationships that we've built with media that we almost take for granted sometimes now. Like when I started, there was just a lot of fractured relationships or non-existent relationships for a lot of reasons. And now, even though we do get weekly coverage in the Sun Times now, but Tribune, it's still here or there. We're getting more coverage than we did when I first came. Local TV, we're getting covered regularly. Still a lot of work to be done, but I'm just really proud of like the progress that we've made to where now we almost kind of take it for granted at times. If you don't think about it,
Absolutely.
And so still more to do, but I think we've made a lot of really good progress in the last 6.5 years.
Awesome, man.
So,
I'm so happy to hear. Awesome stuff. Good job. Thank
you. For sure. Yeah. Team effort, but thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. What would you say is the most rewarding aspect of your job? Or what you do and all that?
Oof. I mean, it man, that's a good question. I think what I enjoy the most about it is, like I said, I grew up playing the sport my whole life. I really enjoyed just like being an athlete and being in a team environment.
Yeah.
I just think it teaches you so many good life skills and the connections and the relationships that you're able to make with people from all over the world. It really like broadens your worldview, right? And gives you this just better perspective, and you're more cultured, and like you when you travel you might know someone over here and the relationships that come with that. So I always loved that as a player, and it was something I was gonna miss, just like not really being in that like locker room team environment anymore. And so I think that's one of the things I've really enjoyed about my career is it's like I get to be on the team without having to do all the running, which is like always my dream scenario. I hated preseason. I hated fitness. I was thinking about this preseason when the team was here and they reported and they were doing the beep test on day one. And I'm like, God, I really don't miss this. And I was just like, but I'm here. I get to be a part of it, but I don't have to do that, which is the part that I dreaded the most. And so for me, it's kind of like a dream come true from that side.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, I feel you. As a former rugby player, the only sport I do now is darts at the pub.
Yeah.
So it's lovely to take a break. No treadmills, no nothing. No nothing.
Just got to work the biceps.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome, man.
Nice.
So it's hot on everyone's mind, right? The World Cup,
Yep.
2026. It's coming here to the States and all around in North America.
Yep.
Going at it from a sports comm side, how much do you think that has to do with a lot of the recent growth of American soccer? And where do you think there's like even more rooms for growth that can happen because of it?
Yeah, no, really good question. I think the World Cup is going to be massive for soccer in the U.S., right? I think everybody who follows the sport is aware of that. And when you look at what the 94 World Cup did for soccer in the U.S., I mean, MLS was literally born out of the 94 World Cup.
Yeah.
Right? And so
Absolutely.
I think now the league has made tremendous progress. Since then, it's grown exponentially. You look at the clubs, the investment. I mean, it's a totally different league than even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I think, the World Cup is always that time when even people who are very casual soccer fans or don't even follow soccer at all tune in. And you've seen so many people tell you they became fans because I watched this World Cup or this, and are now lifelong fans of the sport. So I think the hope is 2026 is going to be now on the home soil.
Yeah.
It's one thing you're getting into it when you're watching games that are being played in Korea or Germany or somewhere else in the world. Now they're going to be here in the U.S. So you're going to be witnessing that culture and that atmosphere and that quality of soccer in person, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to have an even bigger impact. And then now, after that, you turn and you say, I want to stick with this. Where can I support? Does my city have a team? You have a very high-functioning, well-respected league in the U.S. that now exists. And so hopefully, people coming off that high of the World Cup, they'll turn to MLS because they want to continue with the sport, and the league as a whole will gain more fans as well. But I just think the World Cup, it's the biggest sporting event on the planet. And so
Absolutely.
To have that in like one of the biggest commercial markets in the world, in a country that's really like the sport of soccer is growing a ton in that country, I just think it's like a perfect confluence for rapid growth. So that's what everyone keeps saying. Let's see what happens. But I do feel that the 2026 World Cup is going to be a big turning point for the sport in the U.S.
Absolutely, because for me too, right? Like going back to UK, talking to people and my family, there's always the misconceptions about American soccer, right?
Yep.
Like, they're just B League, right? It's all messy, XYZ, right? I think it gives us almost an opportunity now to have that magnifying glass on American soccer culture.
Yeah.
Right? That the world can really tune into and see for themselves that, hey, we really are building those foundations like you were talking about earlier. Right?
110%. I think the culture will be on display, and I think in general, like, just this is just anecdotal. I don't have any real evidence for this, but I feel like the average American soccer fan is so much more knowledgeable about the game now than before, and I see that from, I spend a lot of time reading what fans are saying on Twitter about us, and you see, you're like, okay, they know what they're talking about now. It's not like the early days of MLS or and then on top of that, so the culture's gotten a lot better, more sophisticated. We're real fans now. You look at the infrastructure that exists and some of these stadiums, MLS stadiums that are going to be hosting World Cup matches and also teams that are training. And this is a shameless plug for the Fire. Like the Performance Center that we just built, team is going to start training in here very soon, is arguably one of the best in the world, not just in the U.S., in the world. And that's kind of the norm throughout MLS now. It's not like our facilities miles and above better than everyone else's. It is shameless. I'm biased. I'm gonna shameless, but it is the best in the league. Yeah. But there are so many multi-million-dollar, world-class, state-of-the-art performance centers and stadiums specific to soccer that now exist in the U.S. So I think that'll also surprise a lot of people when they come over and they see not only the atmosphere and the fan culture that exists, but just like the resources and the infrastructure that's also been developed in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, there's like a genuine want now for everything.
Yeah.
And those resources absolutely are starting to get solidified.
Yeah.
I mean, we as a club, we had our tryouts at Northwestern's Ryan Fieldhouse back a couple months ago now. And I will say, like, going into a state-of-the-art facility, it's cool. Yeah. It really touches you a bit, you know. Yeah. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it motivates you for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, awesome, man. So kind of as a way of finishing off the podcast every week, we finish off with some rapid fire questions where, you know, I'll just list off some stuff and see what you like to get from it. Right?
Okay. So, sounds good.
So first one, right? Who is a leader or mentor you would call first to seek advice from?
Ooh, Andrew Swanson. No, I'm just kidding.
The mastermind behind everything. Right? He's incredible.
If I needed theater advice, certainly.
Absolutely, he's incredible.
And soccer, but no, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, you know, my family. I lean on my family quite a bit, but I would say outside of family, our now former sporting director, Georg Heitz, is someone that I developed a really good relationship with over the years. Someone that I definitely admire in terms of, you know, I know fans have mixed feelings about the stuff that happened on the field. I understand. Georg understands, but I obviously was fortunate to see a different side of Georg and how he deals, how he leads, how he deals with people, how he leads people, just the kind of person he is. And he's a smart guy too, and a lot of experience in this business. And he also started out in journalism as well. So he understands my space pretty well. So he's definitely someone I lean on. And then there's another guy who folks might know by the name of Evan Whitfield, who used to play for the Fire, worked for the Fire as well. We got really close during my time there. Just a very sharp dude who knows the business well. And we have a lot of similar experiences and upbringing. So definitely someone I lean on from time to time as well. Not all the time, Evan. Don't get too excited. But every once in a while. If George isn't available, I call Evan. I'm just kidding.
Love it. If you had a time machine way back in world sci-fi and all that, and you can travel back in time and watch any player live, who would you go and see?
Oh, this one is an easy answer for me. Diego Maradona. I think I've seen all the documentaries and everything, and you get a good kind of taste of it from that. But I would have loved to have seen him live, especially when he was at Napoli and he was just like carrying that team, or even in Mexico City with Argentina when he won that World Cup. I don't know. I saw a documentary on him a few years back. I think it's on HBO or something that like just explained his life and coming up from Argentina going to Italy, and he was just like larger than life, man. He was like a rock star.
Yeah.
He was like the Beatles or something. For sure. So to see that live, I think would be pretty cool.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah. What city would you choose to move to just to watch soccer?
Ooh, so this actually doesn't have too much to do with the city itself, even though I do like London as a city. I'm just an Arsenal fan. So
comes with the territory, I guess, right?
Exactly. So it goes without saying there, but there's also so many teams in London as well, right?
The coach is incredible.
And the culture is great. So I feel like, you know, I could get over the weather part. I feel like I'd watch some really good footage.
Yeah. So, I mean, as a Celtic fan, Glasgow isn't paradise all the time. So totally feel you. Who are the top 3 most impressive players you've ever watched to play in person?
Oh, man. This is a good one. So I think I'm going to start with a guy that played with the Fire. Bastian Schweinsteiger. Was really cool to watch Basti live.
Yeah.
And I like to pride myself, to be honest, on like not really getting starstruck, because I've been, you know, you have to be like that when you work in the business. But I remember the first time I walked in a room when I just started at the Fire and he was in the room. And I kind of had this like, holy shit, that's Bastian Schweinsteiger moment internally. I think it was the calves. I don't know. There's something about those calves. And
divine.
Divine, to say the least. And he was also just a great person, but he was so good. And like those are the kinds of players that I really like really technical, smart players.
Absolutely.
And so I like really just appreciated seeing the way that even though physically he had slowed down a little bit, he almost never lost the ball because he was 2-3 steps ahead.
Yeah. And
he was just orchestrating everything on the field. And he could play a freaking perfect diagonal with his left foot, 40 yards, no look. I mean, I think it's, one of the things that if you're a new soccer fan, you don't necessarily appreciate right away. But if you're someone that really follows the sport, like you understand how hard it is to do those things. And so I was just like, I had to like, we talk about not being a fan. There were so many times where I had to like just catch myself like, like in awe of the way this guy was playing because I had to ask him to do an interview after the game. So he's number one. I would say number two is Messi, obviously.
Yeah.
Goes without saying. He's the GOAT, in my opinion.
Absolutely agree with you.
And then third, Eden Hazard. Yeah, that guy was an animal, man. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So those are my three.
Yeah. And I'll say last question then.
Yep.
What advice would you give to someone who is interested in pursuing a career in sports communications?
Oof. I get this question a lot, and I never really know how to answer this question in the best way. But I think for me is you have to work on, if you're just starting out, right? Like put yourself in situations where you're going to be able to learn the fundamentals. And so that's obviously writing is a huge, huge part of that.
Yeah.
And so I always believe that like you're always learning in your career, but certainly at the beginning, you really need to focus on mastering the fundamentals, and maybe they won't be as sexy as like, you're working with this player, this coach day in, day out, but that's what's going to get you there. And I know that might sound cliche. So working on your writing, right? And like some of the nitty gritty stuff that come with being in the industry. And then also, like seeking people out as much as you can, to just ask questions, learn as much as you can before you go into it to see if it's even something that you really want to see yourself doing, or that you'd want to do. And I also think like internships are a great way to do that because it gets you in the business. You can build the relationships and you can kind of get a real life. You can read about it in the books or online all you want, but to actually experience it and see for yourself, like, okay, is this something that I want to pursue? Is this for me? I think is really, really valuable. So I guess that would be my advice, and just work hard. Honestly, just work hard and be a good person too.
Yeah, amen to that.
That will always take you very far. If you're putting in the work and you treat people right, that's for me a very simple philosophy that I've always tried to apply to my just day-to-day life, but also career. I mean, there's never any guarantees with anything, but I guarantee you with that, you'll have a better chance of success than if you don't do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jhamie, for coming on today. As a part of a thank you, we got a match day poster from Caden McGreedy.
Look at this.
He's one of our local artists that helps our club getting all of our stuff together, our social media posts, everything. He is an incredibly talented artist.
This is top notch. Thank you, Caden. Very nice. Thank you guys for this. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on. It was great to talk to you guys about this.
I absolutely love this conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Ahoy there! Thank you for listening to Stone by Stone, an Edgewater Castle podcast. Be sure to listen to our next episode, or better yet, subscribe to our channels on YouTube, where you can find video versions of our episodes, Spotify, Apple Music, or anywhere else you get your podcast fix. We'll have a lot of exciting new content coming up throughout the year, and we want you to stay along for the ride. In fact, you should probably just follow us on all social media platforms also. Just to be safe. And with that, I leave you be. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for supporting the club, listening to the podcast, and as per usual, go Rooks.